Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt, good to see you again, as we do every Tuesday. This government saying no to joining Britain and the US in finding and sharing developments in nuclear science to give people clean, reliable electricity. What is the game here?
Well, for the Labor Party, this is clearly them putting domestic policy interests over our national interest. The gain for them, or the perceived gain they think they'll get, is that by not joining it, they don't embarrass themselves on the domestic political stage and can continue their ridiculous and juvenile scare campaign on nuclear energy. The problem for us is that the Labor Party has already destroyed our nation's energy security, and now they're in the process of destroying our national security as well. Not joining an agreement that we were invited to do so by our friends and allies, the UK and the US, is absolutely insane from a national security perspective. Keep in mind, Andrew, that Australia had always been a member of the predecessor to this proposed agreement, the International Generation 4 Forum. It was focused on developing new nuclear technologies, so-called Generation 4 technologies. Australia was still a member because we actually do have some of the world's best nuclear scientists. We have a nuclear reactor at Lucas Heights, 30 kilometres from Sydney. We lead the world in nuclear medicine. So we had something to provide to a forum on advanced nuclear technologies, even if we weren't going to use the energy technologies that came out of them, given our laws here. But this Labor Party has trashed all of that cooperation we have done. They've trashed the record and the history and the future of the great nuclear scientists we have in this country because they are concerned about losing a domestic political argument here. This goes beyond simply questions about now how much our electricity prices will be in the future, which no doubt will be higher under a Labor government. It is a Labor Party putting fire to the goodwill that we have around the world, our scientific standing internationally, and ultimately the security of all Australians by not cooperating with our allies.
We won't even indulge in nuclear science inquiries. I mean, that is just so sick. But the opposition today, I think, Matt, also needs to explain itself. I mean, Opposition Leader Peter Dutton promised in May to set a cap on overseas students to cut our insane immigration intake. But now that the government wants to pass a law letting it do just that and cut another 100,000 places, Dutton says no, using a bit of salary envy to justify it. Here he is today.
What the government's doing under their so-called cap is baking in a benefit to the bigger universities. Mark Scott made $1.4 billion in 1 year, and the government essentially is baking in that opportunity for the University of Sydney and the other 7, and that's not something that we're going to support.
Now, Matt Canavan is not supporting the government's plan to cap student numbers, to give it the power to do that. Isn't that just playing politics when it's something the opposition said it wanted to do?
No, it's not, Andrew, because this proposal completely destroys many good small businesses in this country. Peter Dutton also said today that we would cut student numbers by even more than the government. We just would do it in a way which didn't destroy Australian businesses. Just to give you one example among many, among the victims of this government's proposal, haphazard and ad hoc proposal, is there's an institution called the Queensland Institute with over 200 students normally. Pre-pandemic, they had those numbers. They've been offered just 30 places under this government's cap scheme that would destroy their business. And I've met with many of them in my home state of Queensland, where because the government is using a 2023 baseline to do these numbers and they're knocking 30% off this baseline, many of these institutions weren't recovered from COVID. And we will just destroy and put hundreds of Australians, thousands of Australians out of work if we were to implement the caps in this way. The government can already cap student numbers through its use of visas. The reason we're in this mess is because they just handed out visas when they came to government like candy, and they've subsequently taken in 500,000 people a year on average for the last 2 years. Ridiculous numbers. They can use that, and they could do it in a much more sophisticated way, which, yes, does share the burden among the public universities that Peter identified, but also, importantly, doesn't destroy small business in Australia. They've built up their business over many decades. They train, they do good jobs, training pilots and nurses and boiler makers, all just useful trades. These are out of the spotlight sort of colleges. Why should they have their livelihoods, Australians have their livelihoods destroyed because this government is in a knee-jerk style trying to react to a problem of their own making?
No, well, I would have thought they could at least negotiate maybe some changes, but still. Now, I said earlier that Energy Minister Chris Bowen, Matt, is at this United Nations climate conference in Azerbaijan. Scares me. He's got our money in his pocket and is over there. Green groups, I've got to say, climate hypocrisy is just so rough. Green groups have called for new rules at this conference to stop us eating so much meat. Save the planet, eat less meat. But I see the climate delegates at this same conference are crowding the restaurant that's selling meat dishes and generally giving a swerve to the vegetarian restaurant right next door. What does that tell you?
Well, I think we all know, Andrew, that if only we could bottle the hypocrisy that comes out of these climate conferences and somehow turn it into electricity, we possibly could have that free power that the likes of Andrew Lee were promoting before, because their hypocrisy seems to be of an infinite supply, free supply, whether it's the planes they travel to these conferences, their diets, as you say, and their consumption habits as well. I mean, this is why they have no credibility among any sensible people around the world. They remain, unfortunately, a Brahmin class among us who think they're better than us and want to write the rules for the rest of us. But as we've seen with the results of the US election, many other elections around the world, these people have no credibility, and the vast bulk of the common sense of people in Western countries see through them completely. We just need to show some leadership, including on my own side, Andrew, if I may. So we need some leadership to show those people, to give those people a banner to rally behind. And so it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to sign up to net zero emissions. We don't have to shut down all our coal-fired power stations just because someone better than you thinks they're better than you says that you have to. Why don't we use our natural resources again for the benefit of the Australian people? That would be a winning electoral message in my book. Plus, it would help make our country lucky and wealthy again.
Well, I hope the rest of your party heard that. I know there are some that totally agree with you, of course. Hope they heard that. And I think the Donald Trump administration, with its plans, is really going to put the fire under the feet of your party as well as the Albanese government. Matt Canavan, thank you so much for your time.